The UK government agency warns that coming massive space storm will wipe out modern society. It will just end all electronics, killing all electronics. This is by J.D. Hayes, Natural News Network, and it's on the Daily Sheeple. The Met Office in the United Kingdom is warning that massive solar storms that occur on an average of about once every 100 years are coming, and that without adequate warning, they could wipe out most technology on Earth, hurling much of the world back to the 18th century. And I would say even worse than that, because we don't even have the things that they had in the 18th century. We don't have ice boxes to cool our food. We don't have gas stoves. We don't have charcoal stoves. We don't have charcoal heating. We don't have gas heating in our house, most of us. We usually have, in most places, in Canada at least, and northern United States, oil heat. We don't have ways of communicating. We don't have an outhouse, let's put it that way. They used to have outhouses at that time. They used to have their kitchens away from the house so that whenever the kitchen caught fire, the house wouldn't catch on fire. So in the 18th century, they were prepared for things like that. Now, the country's National Weather Service says Britain could be crippled by huge electrical disturbances caused by storms in space unless a satellite network is built that can detect them coming. Naturally, the UK would not be the only country affected. It would be worldwide. Such massive solar storms would also wreak havoc on technology the world over, having the greatest negative impact on the most technological advanced countries. We find that for a 1 in 100 year event, with no space weather forecasting capability, the gross domestic product loss to the United Kingdom could be as high as almost £16 billion, that's over $21 billion. The Met Office study said that with existing satellites nearing the end of their life, forecasting capability will decrease in coming years. So if no further investment takes place, critical infrastructure will become more vulnerable to space weather. According to NASA, the U.S. Space Agency utilizes its entire network of heliophysics missions to study space weather, in part for the purposes of detecting and or predicting solar storms. NASA also partners with additional U.S. agencies to fulfill the space weather research or operational objectives of the nation, the agency says on its website. Primarily, this is accomplished through an existing fleet of satellites, mostly belonging to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA for short, the agency said. There's been an interest in the scientific community to detect and measure space weather since the mid-1800s, when disruptions of the then modern telegraph system were observed thanks to solar storms. Also, soon after radio was invented in the early 1900s, radio operators discovered that transmissions were affected by the sun. In 1859, a gigantic solar flare actually doubled the brightness of the sun for a few minutes. Can you imagine that? The sun was twice as bright for a few minutes. That increase in brightness was followed by a surge of magnetism which caused major electric currents in telegraph wires across Europe, causing widespread fires. This is according to what the Sun reported. In 1989, a solar flare affected Quebec, Canada, burning out power cables and causing a massive blackout. Grid-down scenarios would mean the end of civilized life. Today, were that to occur in the United States, chaos would ensue. We have seen what happens to our cities when they are struck by major storms. Looting begins almost immediately. Emergency planners know that in a case where a massive solar storm fries power lines and darkens scores of American cities simultaneously, there is no calculating the amount of death and destruction that would follow, which would only be exacerbated by the length of time power grids are down. In fact, as Vox reported, a few years ago, the U.S. was nearly struck by one of these exceptional solar storms 2 years before in 2012. And most of us had no idea. That's what the website reported. Quote, but had it hit us, the storm could have knocked out power grids, left millions of people without power for months, and caused widespread chaos, end quote. Now, it's not just solar flares we should be worried about. Members of a congressional-appointed committee to study the effects of a nuclear weapons blast over the United States told Congress in 2017 that ultimately 90% of the population would die within a year. That's astonishing. Those, of course, who would not die are the Amish and those communities that do not rely on anything electronic. Specifically discussing North Korea's emerging nuclear capabilities, two members of the so-called EMP, that's Electromagnetic Pulse Commission, said the threat of nuclear attack becomes one of the few ways that such a country could inflict devastating damage to the United States. Some analysts have questioned the reliability of that estimate, but one thing is clear. A massive grid-down scenario from any source, natural or human-caused, would be catastrophic for the whole world. This is by D.H. Hayes, nationalnews.com, and it's on the Daily Sheeple. I'll leave a link below for you for this. Now, from what our space weather is telling us, and I'll make a different video on this because there's a lot to say, we have another CME impact today. The faint, slow-moving CME that left the sun on the 26th might hit Earth's magnetic field today, October 29th, or tomorrow. According to NOAA forecasters, the impact, if any, would be weak, probably causing polar geomagnetic unrest, but not full-fledged storms. We have a hole in the sun, coronal hole. Today, October 29, solar wind flowing from this large coronal hole could reach Earth on October 30th and 31st, so there's even more coming now. We've also have gigantic jets. When you see lightning, you run. But that's what NOAA advises in lightning safety brochures. On October 15, though, pilot Chris Holmes had no place to go when lightning started to crackle in thunderstorms around his aircraft. He was flying at 35,000 feet over the Gulf of Mexico, near the Yucatan Peninsula, when a supercell started pulsing with light, and he says it was just ordinary lightning, though. The cell was creating lots of sprites and jets leaping up from the thunderhead at a distance of only 35 miles. But we'll look at that later. We also have images of the Borisov interstellar comet passing us. We see it between Earth and Mars. For those of you who have telescopes, you can see that for the next couple of months. Also, we've had today and yesterday 31 fireballs. Every night, a network of NASA all-sky cameras scan the skies above the United States for meteoric fireballs. Automated software maintained by NASA's Meteoroid Environment Office calculates their orbits, velocity, penetration depth in Earth's atmosphere, and other characteristics. And the daily results are on space weather. I'll leave a link below for you for this as well. We've had 23 sporadics, 5 Orionids, 3 Southern Taurids, altogether 31 fireballs, and they're pretty fast in velocity from what they say. They're all intersecting, all coming towards us. And we've also have reported 2018 potentially hazardous asteroids. If you'd like to join me on my Patreon account, you will hear content not covered by mainstream media. These riveting stories will be based on my research, and I will state my opinions and give my personal insight on diverse and controversial subjects and world events not covered by mainstream media, and not supported by YouTube guidelines. So whatever I have on my Patreon, most of those will not be on my YouTube channel. Please consider becoming a member today. More of the most significant and important videos will be on my Patreon channel. Your support helps me to continue my research and keeps this YouTube channel alive. And we depend on your support, your generous charity, because we help economically challenged families here in Athens, Greece, in Kapota, and we also help the young generation with university tuition and the community around our church. Thank you.